Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, literary aviatrix, and I'm excited to talk today with the author of a new novel that launched on July 1st, American Sky. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the Literary Aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Carolyn Dasher, welcome.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited about this new book that's coming out. Can you tell us about the book and maybe give us a reading?
Yeah. I'll tell you. I'll show it to you first. Here it is. It's called American Sky, and it's really a historical family saga. It follows three generations of very strong women who are doing things women don't traditionally do. But the core of the book centers around two young female pilots, Georgeanne Ector and Vivian Shaw. They meet in 1943 at WASP training. That's Women Air Force Service Pilot training. And even though they come from different backgrounds, they quickly become great friends. And they both dream of flying the fastest, most powerful planes in the American arsenal. And for a little while, as part of the WASP, they get to do that. But as World War II winds down, the WASP is disbanded, and the female pilots are all told to go home, get married, have babies. And Georgeanne is slightly ahead of the game here. She is at that time newly married and newly pregnant. And Vivian is also newly pregnant but not married, which is a problem in 1943. And the two women make a secret deal. Georgeanne will raise both babies as her own while Vivian keeps flying. But the turbulence from this long-held secret eventually upends their lives and their families. So that's basically the setup for the book.
That's a fascinating premise. How cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so what do you have? Do you want to read some passages for us?
Yeah, I'll read just a little bit. This is I'll set this passage up. This is Georgeanne, who goes by George. It's her first close-up experience with the plane. She's a teenager. She's at a county fair with her best friend, Helen, and a boy that Helen likes, whose name is Frank. And they've just watched a barnstormer do a really cool show. And now the barnstormer is offering people rides in the plane. And Georgeanne is desperate to get a ride in that plane. She's never seen anything like this. Everybody's shocked that this barnstormer pilot was a woman, and it occurs to her that this is something she could do. And so she's about to go up in this plane. So I'll just start there. Up close, the plane, made of wood and cable, seemed like nothing that ought to fly. It looks like a toy, George immediately regretted saying. Best toy I ever played with. Never underestimate a Jenny. They're stronger than they look. I'm Florence, the pilot said as she shook George's hand. Florence looked like someone who ought to be sunning herself poolside in Hollywood, not bundling her beautiful wavy hair into a leather helmet. Climb on up. The mechanic set a stepladder next to the wing. George stepped up and craned her head to see inside the rear cockpit. It had a polished wooden dash pocked with black gauges. In the center, a compass held pride of place. Some of the other gauges were self-explanatory: altitude, airspeed, others mysterious. What's a victometer? Asked George. That's my tack, said the pilot. Place your right foot here. You're climbing in the front. What's a tack? George surprised herself by asking. And what's that one just above it? And that one over to the right? Do you steer with that stick? Florence guided George into the front cockpit. It had no instruments except for a baseball bat-looking stick, just like the one in the rear cockpit. George wanted nothing more than to try it out. She folded her hands in her lap and surveyed the crowd until she spotted Helen. Helen fluttered her eyelids as Frank whispered something in her ear. It must have been very loud over there because Helen stood on tiptoe and tilted her head as if to catch every word. Florence fired up the Jenny, and then it was loud in the plane, too. The engine whined and roared, making George tingle from her toes to her scalp. Keep your mouth closed till we're off the ground, yelled the pilot as she maneuvered the plane across the field. Unless you want bugs in your teeth. George, afraid of saying something else stupid, had planned to keep her mouth shut anyway. She was grateful for the helmet that kept her hair from blowing across her face, and for the goggles that allowed her to keep her eyes open as they sped into the wind. Her stomach lurched only a little as the wheels left the ground. The Jenny lifted, dipped slightly back toward the earth, then went up, up, up until George couldn't help it. She had to bare her teeth in an enormous smile. Bugs be damned. The sky above her was blue and cloudless. Below her lay the patchwork quilt of northern Oklahoma, red and brown earth with hints of green and more quicksilver lakes than she would have imagined. She watched the shadow of the plane as it moved across the red dirt far below them, waving her arm and grinning as her shadow did the same. Her chest hummed with the vibrations of the motor. She felt like she had a chorus inside her, holding a long, low note in unison. Her face and arms stung, raw in the wind, sharply defined. You don't know where you begin and end, her mother used to say when, in the midst of her childhood growth spurts, George knocked over furniture and stumbled into Georgeanne's. Well, today she knew. Up in the air, the wind picking out her outline against the sky, she knew exactly where she began and ended. And I'll just stop there.
Oh, that's fabulous. And I love that you made the pilot a woman.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course. This is so exciting. So this book is going to launch on the 1st of July.
That's right. Yeah.
So tell me about you. Tell me about how you came to writing and how you came to the story of the WASP.
Yeah. So, well, I grew up in a military family. My dad was career Army, and one of my brothers was Army Airborne. So we didn't fly planes, but he jumped out of them. And I also grew up in a family of readers. We, you read, you move a lot in military life. There's always a post library or a local library. And I was a shy kid, and so books were really important to me as a refuge. But it didn't occur to me that I could write one until I was grown. I didn't know anybody who wrote books when I was growing up, and I didn't really ever think about how they actually appeared on the shelf. But yeah, when I was in my 20s, I thought, I have some things some stories I might want to tell, and I think I could do this. And so I started writing then. I didn't get to the WASP until quite a bit later. I have a couple novels in the drawer, and one of those was represented by a former agent of mine who knew about my upbringing. She sent me an episode of NPR's Radio Diaries that was about the WASP. And she said, this was pretty cool, and I think you might consider doing something with this. And I was writing another novel that ended up in the drawer at the time. But when I did listen to it, I was just absolutely captivated by the story. They interviewed a number of WASP on that program, and hearing them talk, hearing their own voices, the pride and the joy that they have about their time flying for the WASP was really moving to me. And I was also really moved by the fact that they didn't get to keep doing it. There was a time during World War II where there was a plan to commission the WASP into the U.S. Army Air Force, and that didn't end up happening. I think partly because we've always had this cultural hesitancy about women serving in the military, and also because there were a ton of men who were on their way home from overseas, and there was concern that there weren't enough jobs for them all. And so, like with the Rosie Riveter women in the factories, the WASP got sent home, and that was really poignant to me. I thought, what if you had received all this expensive, sophisticated training? What if you had this amazing talent, and they really were very talented flyers, and then you were told, you can't do that anymore. Yeah. Some of them didn't fly again.
Right.
Right.
So that interview that you listened to on NPR, do you think that that's something that we could find and link to in the show notes? Okay, great. I will
really
do that.
Do. Yeah, I could. In fact, I could probably send you a link. So.
Okay, well, we'll definitely do that. Okay, so you have this military background of your own, your family background, and you were a reader, and you've written for a while. And so, how did you once you got this idea and decided to work on it? Like, what How did you craft the story? What decisions did you make and why? What research did you do? Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I did a lot of research, and there's so much out there, as you know. In addition to listening to that Radio Diaries episode, there are a lot of books about the WASP. There's some memoirs by WASP pilots, which are really fun to read. I read a great book about some of the WASP. The WASP did different things as part of their service once they graduated. You know, we know a lot about their ferrying work. They flew planes from base to base or from factory to base. What I didn't realize is some of them were doing this drone research. I didn't even know drones were a thing back then. They were test pilots. Often they flew new aircraft before a male pilot ever did. And then what Georgeanne and Vivian do in this book is they fly artillery training flights. They tow targets. And there's this great book by David Stallman called Women of the Wild Blue about the target towing WASP at Camp Davis, North Carolina. And I was just fascinated. This was a really dangerous job.
Yeah.
They would take the planes up at night, the women flying them. There'd be a guy in the back of the plane. He's spooling out this target cable. Down on the ground, you have the ACACs, the artillerymen, who are firing up at the target cable with live ammunition. And of course, they're not very good at their jobs yet. This is training. So sometimes that live ammunition would hit the plane rather than the target cable. And so this was a dangerous assignment to be given. And it really went to some of the very best pilots
Yeah.
among the WASP. And so I had to have Georgeanne and Vivian do that, of course, because that was just so fun. But yeah, so I read a lot about the WASP, and then there's great there's a WASP archive at Texas Women's University, which is excellent. There's a WASP museum in Sweetwater, Texas, which I have not gotten to go to yet, although I would love to someday.
Wearing my Avenger Field shirt in honor.
Yay! Yes, I love it. And so there's really a lot of resources out there for people who are interested in knowing more about this. And then as I kept reading, I got more interested in just a broader experience of women in the military, and that led me to reading about combat nurses in Vietnam and the donut dollies or Red Cross girls who were in Vietnam and World War II, and I think even World War I. And the daughters that Georgeanne and Vivian have in the book, they go on to, one of them is a combat nurse in Vietnam, and one of them is ostensibly a donut dolly or Red Cross girl in Vietnam. So they have their own service experiences, which are also recounted in the book. So it really led me to some interesting places that I didn't expect to go, and that did end up shaping the story.
Oh, I'm really excited about this. So, first of all, the target towing isn't a theme that we get. There are several books that are historical fiction that feature the WASP out there, but we don't get a deep dive into that. So that's exciting. And then these women who served in Vietnam, there's a great book called Fly Girls Revolt, which is the history of the Air Force women. And what I loved about this book by Eileen Bjorkman is that she bridged the gap for us, because in aviation, we have sort of this dead spot between World War II, when, like you said, they told the WASP to go home, and then in the 70s, when women started flying in the military again. But between that, those women who served in Vietnam, she goes into that history, and they kind of bridged that story of proven service for us. So I love that you have that in the book as well. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting growing up in a military family. Of course, I was around women in the ranks, not very many because there were never very many, but
Right.
definitely some. And I knew that back in the past, we had these sort of siloed off services, the WACs for the Army, the WAVES, the
The,
SPAR for the
the
Coast.
spars. My grandmother was a spar. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, of the WASP. But I had never really connected the dots. Like, how did we get from that to women being active members of official,
That's right.
members of the armed services? And so that was a hole for me in my knowledge, and it was really interesting. Yeah, to understand that, like, oh, this wasn't a smooth thing that just happened. Like, it took a lot of time.
So how did you craft the story? Is it linear? Tell me about that.
It is quite linear. There's different points of view. So we hear
Okay.
from Georgeanne and Vivian, of course, and we hear from Georgeanne's mother, who is an Oklahoma farm girl who grew up during World War I and would way rather take apart an engine than sit and sew and cook and things like that. So she's sort of an eccentric woman, and she raises her daughter to be rather eccentric as well, although um, until she starts flying planes, Georgeanne isn't nearly as eccentric as her mother would like her to be. So, um, and and then their daughters, are raised as twins, even though they're not biologically twins, and they don't realize until adolescence that they are actually not biologically related, and then that causes all kinds of crazy stuff to go on in their family. Yeah.
Oh, this is so exciting. It sounds like this book is chock full of strong and interesting female characters. I love it so much already, and I haven't even laid eyes on it yet. That's so great. Well, so I mean, you were introduced to the topic by this agent. You decided to write it. So now that it's written, what are you hoping? What's your message? What are you hoping it accomplishes in the world?
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. I'm always just partly just want to tell a good story, right? But also I was so impressed by these women, and I want other people to be impressed by them too. And I I think it's important to understand that they received the exact same training as their male counterparts. They didn't get a special women's training. They got the exact same kind of training that the men did. And and the fact that they did these jobs, some of which were dangerous, meant the men could go fly combat overseas. So they were pretty essential to the war effort. And I have been thinking a lot recently about how the accomplishments and contributions of women and minorities that are being, you know, removed,
Erased.
erased,
Erased.
scrubbed from certain public records and from certain public websites, and not just women in the past, but contemporary female pilots. Their accomplishments are being taken off websites too.
Correct.
And so I hope that people reading this realize that this doesn't serve us in any way. What is this doing for us? This is what do we get from taking away that information? It's inspiring. It could inspire a whole new generation of really talented people who could accomplish and contribute so much. So, any light I can shine on the history and any inspiration it might give to somebody else who says, hey, I think I want to do that. I would love it if that happened.
Oh, you're speaking my language. You can't erase our books. And if you
No.
try to, we'll send them overseas
There you go.
and we will keep a cache there. And you
Right.
have your electronic copy, so we'll send those to a special place too. You
Right.
can't erase it. Nice
Yeah.
try. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. So, were there any things that particularly surprised you in your research?
Well, I've told you some of them. One of the things that surprised me that shouldn't have surprised me, and I don't know why it did, was that the armed services weren't racially integrated until after World War II, which meant there were some really talented Black female pilots who were shut out of the WASP. The name that I kind of like to tell people about, because I think she's particularly interesting, is Janet Harmon Bragg, who just seemed like she could do anything she wanted to do and would have been such an asset to the program. So, that was interesting to me. Uh, I think it was really interesting and kind of sad to me that some of these women weren't able to fly again after they left the WASP. Of course, airplanes don't grow on trees. They're expensive to fly, they're expensive to maintain, they're expensive to have access to. And so once some of these women went home, they did not have the opportunity to fly again.
Yeah.
Others went off and started flight schools and found ways to keep flying. And so that was really interesting to me too, like who did and who didn't keep flying, and the feelings between those
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, you mentioned Janet Harmon Bragg. You know, we're grateful to Cherie L. Smith and Elizabeth Wein, who published a book last year, American Wings, that gave us more information about her and her contemporaries. And she did accomplish a lot, but you're right, she would have been a huge contributor in probably her cohort, Willa Brown as well, would have been huge contributors to the WASP. So it's definitely their loss that the WASP loss that they didn't have their talents in the mix as well. Well, that is so exciting. So tell me about the publication of this book for you. So you said you had an agent that you weren't working for before or working with anymore. Like, tell me about your relationship with an agent, your publisher, and how that's looking for this launch.
Yeah, so my previous agent and I, we parted ways in a friendly way years ago, and I kept writing, and when I finished American Sky, I was like, okay, I'm going to go start the querying
Right.
process again. The agent querying process sounds like you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It took me I was sending out a lot of query letters, and I was getting a lot of reads. A lot of agents wanted to read it, which was great. That tells you your query letter's doing what it's supposed to do. Your premise is good. All of that. That's great. And then I would get these responses back saying, "Oh, love the writing. What a great story. Sorry, it's not right for my list at this time."
Right.
Which is, as a writer, like, what do you don't know what to do with that, right?
Right. Right.
Um, but then I sent it to the right agent, and that's what it takes. You don't know who that agent is. I sent it to the right agent. Her name is Victoria Sanders. She fell in love with it, and she told me what was wrong with it. She said, I love this story. I want to work with you on this story. We're going to do a revision before I send it out to publishers.
Great.
One of the problem is, and I think this was why it wasn't getting traction earlier, was I had written it all from this omniscient point of view, this all-knowing point of view,
Right.
uh, and she said, look around at the books that are being published right now. They are
Yeah.
not omniscient point of view books. They're closely held third person point of view, or they're first person point of view books to bring the reader really close to the story. And so we redid the whole book to change the point of view.
And did you do it in first person perspective or
No,
third close?
it's in third person, so it's different characters, but
Yeah.
really you
Close.
don't know more than that character knows when you're
Yeah.
hearing from them. So
Yeah, I think I mean, I've been rewriting my novel in various perspectives for a while now, so I get that. And I had multiple perspective novel, and now it's in the one perspective. I've been all over the map with that, so
yeah.
I get that struggle. So that's awesome. You found an editorial agent who
Mhm.
was interested in the story and willing to work with you on it, and then she found a publisher. I can't remember, who did you publish with?
Yeah, so it's published with Lake Union Publishing, which is an imprint of the Amazon publishing group.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
and
still traditionally published,
yep.
and yeah, I was aware that Amazon had some of their own imprints. So that's interesting. And how's that going for you? How is that relationship?
It's been a really great experience. I don't have a traditional publishing experience to compare it to. I haven't done it the other, with a quote unquote
Right.
traditional publisher. So um there are things that are different with Amazon for sure. If it's really important to you to see your book on a shelf in a bookstore, Amazon's probably not going to get you that experience because they're not worried about bookstore distribution. The vast majority of books are sold online, and that's where they focus their marketing efforts, although they're happy to work with a bookstore that wants to carry it.
Okay.
So but they did this really great thing for my book. They selected it as one of their Amazon First Reads options for the month of June, which meant the ebook has been available free to Prime members for the month of June, and for a
Oh, big
very
deal.
low price for non-Prime members for the month of June. And that has allowed the book to get a ton of online ratings before the publishing date. So
Excellent.
we'll see how that plays out. I know, I haven't done it, but I'm new to this.
Yeah.
But they've been great to work with. Excellent copy
Did
editing. Yeah.
Did they pay you in advance?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I
And
mean,
then you have to sell out your advance.
and I have
Yeah.
to send out my advance.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. So
Okay.
yeah.
And so yeah, that's great. I'm kind of bummed about the bookstore thing, but what about sort of what are you doing for publicity beyond Amazon? Like, do you have a tour going? Are you going to be in bookstores? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm doing a big book launch in a small independent bookstore in Portland called Bold Coffee and Books. And then I'm hoping to do some other what I really want to do, what I think would be a blast, and what I'm trying to push to do is I want to talk to book clubs, whether that's online or in person, because I feel like those are like this discussion. You can go deep on themes. They're more interesting than me standing up and giving a presentation. I can really answer the questions people are interested in asking, and so I would really love to talk to book groups. If they're in my local area, I could pop in. If they're online, I could pop in on Zoom, you know.
Well, I have one in mind.
Oh, excellent.
We will definitely. So I do my book list for the year. So we'll definitely get this on the list for next year and
Oh,
have you pop in
fantastic.
for that for
I would
sure.
love it. I would love
Yeah, we would
it.
love to have you. And I have some other ideas or places that you could maybe go be in person and sell
Oh,
this book. So I'll
fantastic.
share
Yeah,
those with
thank you.
you. Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
that
Yeah,
would
and
be
I'd be
amazing.
really interested in talking with, even though I'm not in aviation, and I think it's fascinating what you guys can do and have done, and I love to talk, you know, to female pilots about the book too. I have gotten a couple of emails on my site already from female pilots, which has been really enjoyable to see.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. Well, we'll definitely get the word out in our community and we'll have more of them reach out to you and reading the book. Um, I wanted to ask you this earlier and I forgot. So, are there any particular WASP like individuals on which you based these characters or that loomed large in your research?
I was really careful not to base my characters on any individual wasp. I and in fact at this point my research I started researching this book in 2018. So my research is far behind me at this point, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't even have names in my head anymore.
Well, I mean, you're writing fiction, so it's an amalgam. If there were any in particular, I definitely wanted to give props to them. So yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I
I
get
think
that.
I maybe remember. I hope I'm remembering this name right. I think there was one named Annie Carl, perhaps, who was a test pilot. But she has a really, if I'm thinking of the right one, her memoir was really fascinating to me. But no, I did not. I very conscientiously did not try to pick some real people and base the book on them.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see that. So, is there anything else you want us to know about the book?
I think that's probably it.
Well, this is so exciting, Carolyn. Thank you so much. I do a lot of this thanking authors who aren't, in the aviation community themselves for taking the time to do the research and learn about our history and incorporate it into their writing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. And I'm truly at heart a fiction reader from childhood. And so those are the stories that I enjoy the most because you can get really creative about getting into the characters and their struggles and those kinds of things in ways that you may not be able to do in nonfiction unless it's a memoir, obviously. So thank you so much. It's so wonderful to meet you. I wish you all the success in the world with this book. We cannot wait to read it.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. And thank you for your site. It's such a great resource. I wish I had known about it if it existed when I was doing my research.
I
Fantastic.
started it in about 2021, so probably not. Yeah, I probably was
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
behind you.
Oh, I would have
Where
loved
can we
to have it.
where can we find you online?
Yeah, thanks. You can visit my website at carolyndasher.com,
Mhm.
CarolynDasher.com. And there's information about the book, there's order links, and of course, you can order it through bookshop.org or your local bookstore.
Yep. Okay. And I have those links on my website as well. Use bookshop.org if you can, because they do
Yep,
good things.
they
So,
do good things.
and are you on social media?
I am. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not super active. I could do more.
Okay. Well, we'll help promote it there as well.
Love to post about this.
Don't worry. I will invite you to collaborate.
Oh, excellent. Fantastic.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. Again,
Thank
good
you.
luck and thank you for the book.